Hi, I'm Rob.
And I'm Rob.
And this is Ask Rob and Rob.
Welcome back. It is Tuesday. It's Ask Rob and Rob time. And so we are going to be answering 2 more questions for our lovely listeners. We love receiving your questions. And that's why, Rob, we make it really easy to send them over.
We certainly do. We have one place where you can get your questions in, whether you want it on Ask Rob and Rob or in the Sunday Times. Just go to propertyhub.net/ask. Get your questions in there. You can do it for your computer, your phone, or just type us your message. Whatever medium you prefer, we've got you covered. And because we make it so simple, we've got 2 more great questions in today. And first of all, we are feeling the love from Gary.
Hi, Rob and Rob. Love you both. Thank you so much for all the help you've given over the years. My question is, I bought a flat with 65 years left on the lease at a discount price. 2 years is up now, so I can now force them to give me a new lease. My 2-year fixed has run out, so I've gone on to the follow-on rate at, I think it's 11%. Do I hold tight and wait for the Renters Reform Bill to kick in and hopefully hope to God that they get rid of marriage value and save an awful lot of money that way? Or do I just get on and push the new lease through to get a new mortgage rate and get the figures down? Because at the minute I'm propping it up by about £100 a month because of the new follow-on rate, which I'm happy to do, but all the same, any advice is welcome. Thank you.
Gary, thank you for your question. And ouch, that is one heck of a mortgage rate, isn't it? 11%. I can see why you want to get off that one. I'm actually surprised you managed to get a mortgage for this property in the first place, because for anyone who doesn't know, if you get a lease that gets down to a certain length, it becomes very, very tricky to get finance. At 65 years, clearly it's possible, but some lenders won't be interested. Presumably, that's why you've ended up with a lender that's got such an awful reversionary rate. And the other key date at the moment is 80 years. That's the point at which it suddenly gets more expensive to extend the lease when it gets below that number, because you need to effectively compensate the freeholder and pay some money to them, which makes the whole thing more expensive. So Gary, what you're referring to is actually not in the Renters Reform Bill. It's in another piece of legislation that's being talked about at the moment, which proposes to make various reforms to the leasehold process, including lease extensions, and perhaps including abolishing this marriage value that kicks in when you get to 80 years. However, in the version of this bill that was introduced to Parliament, that marriage value bit wasn't in there. It may get added later. There's still plenty of scope for it to be amended. It was a pretty bare bones version that they started with just to get the ball rolling, but there are no guarantees around it. So a lot of people are in a situation like this at the moment going, oh, well, this is pending, but I kind of need to do it now. Should I do it? Should I do it? Should I wait? And there's no easy answer. I'd say that there's 2 ways of looking at this, which isn't necessarily helpful because it's going to lead you down 2 different courses of action, but maybe you can follow the logic and see which one speaks to you the most. So on the one hand, if this legislation does go through, bearing in mind it could take years, there's going to be a change of government, there'll be delays, anything could happen, and marriage value does go away, then it's potentially going to save you a big chunk of cash. And that saving is highly likely to be bigger than the difference between paying mortgage interest at, say, 5% versus 11% for those 2-3 years, whatever it is. So if it happens, then it's going to be financially well worth waiting. But it is a gamble. The other way of looking at it is, well, you got a discount when you bought the property to account for the fact that the lease was short. If you bought an identical property with a 150-year lease, you'd be paying more for it. Therefore, you should have budgeted for the cost of extending the lease based on your best estimate of what that cost would be. So effectively, it's not a surprise cost. It's just another part of the purchase price that you knew you'd have to pay later. So Gary, I think it's a case of, do you feel like taking a gamble or not? But maybe the way of making that decision is, what's the difference in mortgage payments going to be over, say, 3 years, if that's how long it takes? How much extra will you be paying on your mortgage? And let's just pick a number out the air and say it's £5,000. If then that change in the law doesn't happen and you have to pay the same amount anyway, how annoyed are you? Do you feel like, yeah, it was worth taking that gamble for the sake of the saving? Or do you feel absolutely enraged by the amount of extra interest you've had to spend? That's probably the way I'd think about making this decision. Another thing to do, if you haven't already, is as ever, speak to a mortgage broker. Presumably you've done this already, but if you haven't spoken to a true expert in the case who does loads and loads of buy-to-let cases, make sure you do that, because it may be that there's another lender out there that offers a rate that still isn't fantastic, but better than the 11% that you're paying now. If you could do that and that tides you over for a few years, that could be quite a nice middle ground. But Gary, I hope that helps. You've still got a decision to make, but hopefully that gives you a framework to use when you're making it.
Good luck, Gary. Next up, we have a question in from Nelly.
Hi, Rob and Rob. Thank you very much for the great content in your podcast and also YouTube videos. Really enjoy listening to you both every week. So I have questions for you both this week. So this is regarding the property that I bought recently, 2 years ago basically, without a mortgage. And with renting incomes, it has pushed me to a higher taxpayer bracket, and I'm thinking of transferring the property to a limited company. And I have a few questions, firstly regarding the stamp duty, because I purchased the property for less than 3 years. Do I get exemption from the stamp duty payment, or do I need to pay the stamp duty in advance and get it back later? How is the process? And also regarding releasing equity in the property under limited company, how can it be done if I decide to buy a second property? And also another question, last one, is it more complicated to sell the property under limited company? Thank you so much for your help.
Well, Nelly, I feel like there's quite a few questions in here. Let's start. Okay, because this is a little bit messy, but let's try and clean it up a little bit for you. First of all, do you get an exemption from stamp duty? No. If you move it to a limited company from your personal holdings right now, then you will have to pay stamp duty again. Not good news, but that's just the situation. The good news, though, is if you do move, releasing equity is super simple. It's just like holding it in your own name. Releasing equity, whether it's in a limited company or your own name, is easy. Of course, like Rob's just said in his answer to the last question, always use a mortgage broker. But if you use an experienced mortgage broker who's used to dealing with buy-to-lets, then releasing equity is a simple process. And your last question, if you decide to sell the property, is it more complicated to sell the property through a limited company? No, it's not. It's just like selling another property. It's not like selling a business. You don't sell the limited company, you sell the property. So that clears up your questions, hopefully. Some good news, some bad news, but a lesson for us all. And I'm sorry, Nelly, to use you as an example here, but this is why it is so important to plan your investment strategy. And that includes how you will hold your properties, whether it's in your own name or through a limited company, really carefully. And don't just rush into a buy-to-let purchase if you've not got this sorted out. Because, Nelly, it sounds like you feel like you've made a mistake now, and that mistake is costly, because it's going to cost you a lot of money to transfer that property over. And I think you need to do some calculations now to see if it's worth that cost versus the tax savings you'll make. So, an important lesson to all listeners: make sure you've got your tax affairs in order. Make sure you've got your structure correct. It's not that hard, and some basic advice will get you there, but just get that advice early on so you make the correct decisions.
Okay, so questions answered for Gary and Nelly. Will it be yours next week? Well, you'll have to tune in to find out. And if you haven't sent us a question, it definitely won't be. So you go to propertyhub.net/ask if you want to be in with a chance. We'll see you back here on Thursday for another episode of the Property Podcast. Until then, have a great week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.